January 1945. The Philippines. Cabanatuan prisoner of war camp. To understand why this mission was suicide, you first have to look at the men inside the wire. They weren't soldiers anymore. They were ghosts. These were the survivors of the Bataan Death March. For 3 years they had lived on a diet of worm-infested rice and beatings. A healthy American male weighs 170 pounds. The average weight of a Cabanatuan prisoner was 95 pounds. They were skeletons wrapped in parchment-thin skin. Scurvy had loosened their teeth. Beriberi had swollen their legs. Dysentery was slowly killing them from the inside out. The Japanese High Command had issued a kill-all order. As the American Army approached, the guards were instructed to liquidate the camps, burn the barracks, shoot the survivors, leave no witnesses. Inside the camp, 500 Americans waited to die. They listened to the rumors. They knew the end was coming. They had no weapons. They couldn't run. They could barely walk. Their only hope lay 30 miles away, across enemy lines, in the hands of a unit that hadn't even existed when the war started. Lieutenant Colonel Henry Mucci commanded the 6th Ranger Battalion. He was a man who chewed cigars and didn't believe in the word impossible. But when he looked at the map, the word impossible was the only one that fit. The objective? Penetrate 30 miles behind Japanese lines. The target? A heavily fortified camp holding 500 POWs. The opposition? The camp was guarded by 200 elite soldiers. But that wasn't the problem. The problem was the Kabu River Bridge, just a mile away. On the other side of that bridge sat the main Japanese force, 8,000 troops, tanks, artillery, trucks. If the alarm went off, those 8,000 men would swarm the camp in 15 minutes. Mucci had 121 Rangers. Do the math. 121 against 8,000. That's a ratio of 1 to 66. If this was a Hollywood script, the producer would reject it for being unrealistic. But Mucci didn't have a producer. He had Captain Robert Prince, his tactical genius, and a plan that relied on absolute, perfect timing. The march began. For 2 days, the Rangers moved through the jungle, guided by Filipino guerrillas, the Alamo Scouts. These locals were the unsung heroes. They knew every trail, every village, every Japanese patrol route. But as they approached the camp on January 30th, the jungle disappeared. Surrounding the Cabanatuan camp was a flat, open rice paddy, 1 mile of zero cover. The grass was knee-high. The ground was flat as a table. To get to the camp, 121 heavily armed men had to crawl across this table in broad daylight and early twilight. If a single Japanese sentry in the guard towers looked down, it was over. If a reflection from a watch flashed, it was over. If a bird flew up spooked, it was over. Captain Prince looked at the field. It was a kill zone. He needed a distraction. He needed something so bizarre, so loud, and so confusing that every Japanese soldier would look up instead of down. He radioed for air support. He didn't ask for a bomber. He asked for a magician.
Enter Captain Kenneth Schrieber and Lieutenant Bonnie Rux, flying a P-61 Black Widow. This is where the story connects to our previous video. The P-61 was a night fighter. It was black. It was terrifying. But tonight, it wasn't there to shoot. It was there to perform a psychological circus act. The pilot, Captain Schrieber, approached the camp at 1800 hours. He did something that goes against every rule of flying. He cut the power to his left engine. Then he slammed the throttle on the right engine. Then he feathered the prop. The plane lurched. It backfired. Bang! Pop! Bang! To the Japanese guards on the ground, it sounded like the plane was dying. It sounded like an engine failure. Schrieber flew directly over the camp at treetop level, 200 feet. He banked the plane violently, pretending to struggle with the controls. Every single Japanese head in the camp turned upward. They watched the crashing American plane. They laughed. They pointed. They waited for the explosion. And while 200 pairs of eyes were glued to the sky, 121 Rangers crawled on their stomachs through the mud, cutting the barbed wire fences right under the guards' noses. The Black Widow had woven its web.
1940 hours. The sun had completely vanished. 121 Rangers were now positioned around the camp. They were lying in ditches, behind bushes, and aimed through the wire. Every Ranger had a specific target. F Company was targeting the rear guard towers. C Company was targeting the main gate and the officer barracks. Lieutenant John Murphy checked his watch. He raised his M1 Garand. His target was the rear guard tower. Distance, 30 yards. He didn't aim for the center of mass. He waited for the guard to turn. The silence was heavy. You could hear the crickets. You could hear the breathing of the men next to you. Then Murphy squeezed the trigger. Crack! The single shot echoed like a thunderclap. The guard in the tower slumped forward. That single bullet was the switch that turned on the apocalypse. Within 0.5 seconds of that shot, every weapon in the Ranger Battalion opened fire simultaneously. If you were a Japanese soldier in Cabanatuan that night, you didn't see an attack. You saw the world end. The Rangers unleashed a wall of lead. Thompson submachine guns sprayed the guard towers. BARs shredded the wooden walls of the barracks. The physics of the assault were calculated to be overwhelming. In the first 15 seconds, the Rangers fired over 3,000 rounds of ammunition. The Japanese officers were drinking sake in their quarters. They never reached their weapons. The heavy .30-06 rounds from the BARs punched through the thin bamboo walls like they were paper, cutting down everyone inside. Bazooka teams fired rockets into the pillboxes and tank sheds. Whoosh! Boom! The fuel depot ignited. The camp was suddenly bathed in daylight, illuminated by burning gasoline. The shadows vanished. The Rangers could see everything. The Japanese were blind, deaf, and dying.
While C Company decimated the guards, the rescue team, under Lieutenant O'Connell, cut the locks on the POW cages. They kicked open the doors. O'Connell screamed, "We are Yanks! Get the hell out! Run!" He expected cheering. He expected a stampede. Instead, he got silence. The prisoners didn't move. They huddled in the corners. Some were crying. Some were laughing hysterically. Their minds, broken by 3 years of torture, couldn't process reality. They thought this was a Japanese trick. They thought the guards were trying to lure them out to shoot them in the back, a common game in the camps. One prisoner looked at a ranger, a giant, well-fed man in a clean uniform holding a Thompson, and muttered, "You're not real. You're a dream." The rangers literally had to tackle the prisoners. They had to drag them, carry them, and throw them over their shoulders. "Buddy, I'm real. Feel this," one ranger shouted, slapping a prisoner on the back. "We're going home." The evacuation began, and this was the logistical nightmare. Many prisoners were too weak to walk. They had Shank's mare, legs swollen from beriberi so bad they looked like elephant legs. Others weighed 80 pounds and had no muscle mass left. The rangers became human ambulances. One ranger carried a prisoner on his back. Another prisoner, blind from vitamin deficiency, held on to the ranger's belt. They formed a chain of life moving toward the Pampanga River, but the clock was ticking. The gunfire alerted the main Japanese force. Remember the 8,000 Japanese soldiers just a mile away? They were awake, and they were angry, and they were sending tanks toward the Kabu River Bridge. The only thing standing between the escaping skeletons and a massacre was a small group of Filipino guerrillas and a few rangers with a bazooka.
This is the part of the story often forgotten. The Alamo Scouts and Filipino guerrillas held the Kabu River Bridge. It was the Thermopylae of the Pacific. A Japanese tank rumbled onto the bridge. If it crossed, it would run down the slow-moving column of prisoners in minutes. A Ranger bazooka team was waiting in a ditch. They had to wait until the tank was dead center. Whoosh! The rocket hit the lead tank. It exploded, turning into a burning roadblock. The Japanese infantry tried to charge across the bridge. The Filipino guerrillas opened fire with machine guns. For 30 minutes, they held back a force 10 times their size. They bought time with blood. Back in the field, the column of prisoners moved painfully slow, inch by inch, step by step. Mucci ran up and down the line. "Keep moving! If you can't walk, crawl! If you can't crawl, roll!" The shooting stopped. The camp was destroyed. But the mission was only half over. Now they had to move 511 sick, starving men 30 miles back to American lines. The Rangers couldn't carry everyone. The prisoners were collapsing every few yards. This is where the Filipino people became the heroes. From the darkness of the villages emerged a silent army. Civilians, farmers. They brought their carabaos, water buffaloes, and wooden carts. Hundreds of carts lined up. They loaded the weakest prisoners onto the straw beds. It became a surreal procession. A slow-moving caravan of wooden wheels and giant beasts creaking through the moonlight. The Rangers walked alongside, guns ready, scanning the tree line. Every bump in the road caused agony for the prisoners' frail bones, but the carts kept moving. If the Japanese caught them now, it would be a massacre in an open field. The pace was agonizingly slow, 2 miles per hour. It was a race between a tortoise and a pack of wolves.
Victory is never free. Captain James Fisher, the battalion surgeon, had stayed behind at the gate to treat the wounded. A Japanese mortar round landed near him. He was mortally wounded. As the column moved towards safety, Fisher was carried on a stretcher. He was dying. While 500 men were celebrating their life, the man who was supposed to heal them was fading away. He died before they reached the lines. His death was a heavy price, but look at the return on investment. 1 Ranger officer died. 1 Ranger corporal died. In exchange for those 2 lives, 511 Americans were pulled out of the grave. It was the harshest mathematics of war, but every Ranger would tell you it was worth it. Dawn broke on January 31st. The column reached the Talavedra River. Suddenly, a rumble shook the ground. The Rangers raised their bazookas, thinking it was a Japanese counterattack. But then they saw the star. The white star painted on olive drab steel. It was a column of M4 Sherman tanks from the U.S. 6th Army. The reaction of the prisoners was visceral. Men who hadn't cried in 3 years fell to their knees and wept. They touched the tanks as if they were religious artifacts. They asked the tank crews, "Is it true? Are we really free? Do you have cigarettes?" One prisoner looked at a Ranger and asked, "Buddy, can I have a bite of your chocolate?" The Ranger gave him the whole bar. The prisoner took 1 bite and threw it up. His stomach had shrunk so much he couldn't process real food. That's how close they were to death.
The Great Raid on Cabanatuan remains the most successful rescue mission in the history of the United States military. Let's look at the final scoreboard. U.S. Rangers, 121 men deployed. Filipino guerrillas, 200 men deployed. Japanese garrison, 200 elite guards killed instantly. Japanese reinforcements, 1,000 stopped at the bridge. Prisoners rescued, 511. Rangers killed, 2. It was a tactical masterpiece. It combined stealth, the crawl, deception, the P-61 Black Widow, violence of action, the 15-second assault, and logistics, the ox carts. It proved that a small, highly trained force could paralyze a numerically superior enemy through sheer audacity. When the prisoners returned to the United States, their stories shocked the world. The brutality of the camps was finally exposed, but the story of the raid gave the country hope. It reminded the world of a simple promise made to every American soldier. No matter where you are, no matter how deep you are in enemy territory, we are coming for you. The Rangers lived by their motto that night, "Rangers lead the way." And for 511 men, they led the way home. If this story of the perfect mission inspired you, hit that like button. Subscribe to the channel. We have more stories of impossible missions coming up. And never forget the P-61 pilot who turned off his engine to save 500 lives.